For instance, oh, I've got this disease and I need to cure it. That language alone will perpetuate the maintenance of that disease. I have a bad back. Well, you're going to find actually have a bad back. Then your mind body system to keep recreating those symptoms. Now, let me explain how this works.
Welcome, Marvin. Thank you so much for coming on our show and speaking to the listeners. Marvin Oka from Behavioural Modelling Research. Marvin, tell us a bit about what's going on.
Oh, thanks, Frederick. And it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me on. Yeah, look, thanks for letting me talk a little bit about what I do, because my work is in the area of what's called neurobehavioral modeling. And some people might not really know what that is. Very few people do. But essentially, what we do as neurobehavioral modelers is we look at forms of human ability. And our job is essentially replicate it. Now, the challenge is that all forms of human competency they require forms, neurological processes occurring outside the awareness of anyone doing it. So let me give an example to make it a bit more tangible for you and your viewers. So if you're viewing this, I know it's going to sound strange, but let me ask this. If you can kind of just raise up your hand for right now, even if you're just watching the recording of this, and just wiggle your fingers. Now, as a modeler, I would ask you, how do you do that? How do you actually wiggle your fingers? Let's say I don't know how to do it, and I'm asking you as the expert, as the master, how do you do that? Very few people, in fact, I haven't met anyone yet that can actually explain exactly how they wiggle their fingers. They basically say, well, you hold up your hand and you wiggle. Well, okay, that's accurate, but uninformative to someone who really needs to know the how. Because the processes that you're actually using are to wiggle your fingers, something as simple as wiggling your fingers are occurring outside your awareness. I'd ask questions like, how did you know to hold your hand that high? Why not up here or down here? Or well, how did you know which finger to go first? And how did you know how fast to wiggle your fingers and how far down before the next one went? And how did you know when to stop? None of those things would occur to you in consciousness. You would have just done it. So our job as modelers is we go in and we say, we're like neurological hackers. And we go in and we say, how is it that you do what you do even outside your own awareness? Now, I've got colleagues that look at things like sports performance, etc. But my particular area of interest is looking at things that elevate consciousness in society, consciousness and a wiser decision making in society. So I do a lot of work with leadership teams, executive leaders that are looking at making wholesale changes in their organization, working with culture, sometimes with government agencies, looking at policy. My job here is not so much to instruct them as to what they should be doing, but it's more about modeling the ones who can do it, the ones who are able to perceive how a system works, how to work through the complexities, how to deal with the types of things that will neutralize change. And this is what's called second order change or transformational change. First order change is any change inside of a system. So nothing really changes, much to do about nothing. I think many of people will be familiar with that, whether inside of an organization or even when their own personal health and wellness issues. Sometimes you might be trying a range of things and nothing seems to work because a lot of those changes are first order. You've changed some things, but your psychology still hasn't changed. Your whole mindset really hasn't changed. Whereas in a second order change, the system changes, the culture changes, the paradigm changes. So I look for those types of things as a neurobehavioral modeler. What would cause that? And lo and behold, we find that a good chunk of that is what I call generative learning, which is the ability for someone to learn in new ways that actually evolves their own internal consciousness, internal capacity for making wiser decisions. So that's the nature of the work I do. So, and I look at it in a range of different types of applications.
I find it really fascinating, having done a course of behavioural modelling with you and now certified in that area myself. What my passion is in the wellness area, and we talked about wellness languaging. Can you tell us a little bit about how that fits together with your current work and what your passion is behind that?
Yeah, thanks for that. Because lots of people get curious about those types of things, and they'll say, "Well, I've got a focus on things like from wellness languaging all the way to things like sales. And people ask, well, how do these things connect up? So, for instance, even in the selling context, it's not about selling. It's more about looking at how consumers make wise decisions in how they make purchases, because the economic drivers in our society is what's causing the society to behave the way that it is. So, if consumers were wiser in their decision making, we'd have a whole different set of offerings out there in the marketplace, and business would have to respond differently. So, there's a second order angle to it. Similarly, in the health and wellness arenas. Now, this is a very fascinating thing around the whole notion of wellness languaging. And for a lot of people, it's an unusual set of terms to put together. What does wellness have to do with languaging? And I'll propose that they are intimately connected. And in fact, if anyone's ever struggled with health or wellness issues, and as I mentioned before, you've been trying a range of things, and you still haven't been able to break through to some sort of personal transformation about your health or wellness issues, there's a good chance, there's probably a high likelihood that one of the things holding your mindset together that keeps the problem the way it is, that keeps the problem recurring. Some of it may be physical, but a good chunk of it may actually be the mindset you're having based on the language, based on your internal dialogue, your internal narratives that you're saying to yourself. So, for instance, if you say to yourself, for instance, oh, I've got this disease and I need to cure it, that language alone will perpetuate the maintenance of that disease, right? Of that disease, we should say, right? Or that ailment, or someone says, I have a bad back. Well, you're going to find when you study things like wellness languaging, you don't actually have a bad back. That is an improper use of language. Or put it this way, if you use that kind of language, you will keep creating your body system, your mind body system, to keep recreating those symptoms. Now, let me explain how this works. First, the mind and the body. Do they go together? Well, look, they not only go together, many areas of neuroscience today will even use one word for these two things. We used to say, for instance, in the past, the mind influences the body and the body influences the mind. And that was the best way of using language to describe that phenomenon. Nowadays, certain areas in neuroscience will just use one word. They'll just say body mind. It's spelled and written as one word, because they're trying to point out that these are two facets of the same system, of the same organism. Your mind and body are intimately connected. I often tell people, by the way, someone said, if anyone ever doubts the body mind connection, or the body mind integration that goes together, it's like, well, terrific. Well, have about 6 beers and now try and think clearly and make a very accurate decision. Good luck. Right? The biological changes that's going to occur in your body are going to affect your mental emotional responses, and vice versa. Right? Things like high stress, things that stressful thoughts will instantly impair the immune system. Your body and mind are one and the same system. This starts to explain, for instance, as well documented in research around the placebo effect, and why and how it is that placebos work. Now, it's indisputable that the placebo effect is real. It actually does happen. It does work. Now, as does the nocebo, which is the counter to that. If someone is thinking negatively, for instance, they'll start to get negative results in their body, or their physical ailments or things of that nature. But what is that? If you were to ask most people that understand the placebo effect, what is it that causes the placebo effect? And they will tell you beliefs. Whether someone believes that the sugar pill will work or not, and it works, well, then it works. Okay, now that's not to discount it. As modern neuroscience will show, you don't discount the placebo effect. You don't wash it away saying, oh, it's just in the mind. No, that's the point. The point is the mind and the body can actually start to work together in very healthy and well ways. So, but let's take a look at the structure of a belief. What is it that makes a belief a belief? Well, it has many different facets, many different structures, etc. But at the end of the day, when I ask you, for instance, if I said, Frederick, what do you believe in? Like, what do you believe is possible? What do you believe is the notion of life? Guess what will come out? Narrative. What will come out is your languaging. You'll start saying things, right?
Absolutely.
What you say to yourself and what you say out loud to others. Well, what is the foundation of narrative? Language. The language you're using, what you say and how you actually say it. Now, by the way, What is the basis of language? Well, it'll be the exact words belonging to that language. Now, a great both philosopher as well as a call him quite an intellectual genius of our time, a gentleman named Count Alfred Korzybski. He created an entire field called general semantics. And Korzybski said many profound things, but one of the things he said was that words are not trivial. Words have a kinesthetic impact.
Words are
Now,
things.
what he was saying, words are things. What he was saying is, for a word to be meaningful to you, for it to have meaning, as opposed to meaningless, it goes in one ear, not the other, right? But for a word to actually register with you, with meaning, it gets processed through the body,
Hmm.
right? If I said to you, "Tell me about your mother," out will come instant feelings that gets processed through the body, right? If I said, "Uh-oh, we have a problem," bang, your body will respond with a stress response in a particular way, right? If I said, "Oh, let's do something enjoyable tonight," well, you'd instantly start thinking, what would be enjoyable? And then instantly your body's going to respond to the words enjoyable. That this is a very powerful thing to understand. It's again the mind body, part of the same system. That the words and the languaging you use as part of your narrative about the world, about your body, about your health, about your relation, they're all impacting the way your body is responding. And if you are using a lot of language that is based on what you can't do, your body and mind will respond accordingly. About what kinds of health issues that you quote unquote have, well, guess what your body will do? It will start creating these things. Now, the thing to recognize is, as a great example, let me give you an idea of the power of language on this and how it comes back to the notion of wellness languaging, using language in a way that promotes a wellness consciousness within yourself. Uh, One of the distinctions we use is, again, you don't have to worry about the technical term, but it's called in transformational linguistics, it's called a nominalization. Now, it's a fancy word, but basically what it means is when you take processes, in real life, they're processes, they're ongoing things.
Mhm.
But through language, we distort the process by making it a noun. We turn it into a thing, just like what you're saying, words are things. We turn it into a thing, right? Now, in order to understand both the power as well as the potential devastation that can occur in someone's wellness, let me come back to Count Alfred Korzybski, as he pointed out, and he said, the map is not the territory. So if I have a map of Australia, that is not Australia. It's just a representation of Australia. The map is only as useful as it helps me get around Australia. Right? If the map is off, then if I use that map, good luck. It's kind of like if your GPS ever got you lost in your car, you'll know the power of working to an ineffective map. Right? Now, language are maps. Our narratives are maps of the world. They're not the world itself. So when we say we had a great dinner, those words are not the dinner. Right? We're only using words to represent the fact of our to represent our experience in a particular way. If the map is off, our navigation of the territory will be very difficult. If our mapping, use of language that creates our beliefs, therefore another set of maps, is doesn't actually fit the way the world actually works, and our beliefs will get us into trouble. Our beliefs will produce a whole range of problems in our life, within our relationships, to our finances, to our health and wellness. So we need to keep re-examining these maps. Now, let me give an example coming back to this notion of normalizations. So an example of this is the word relationship. The word relationship is a normalization. It's a process. People say, I have a bad relationship with someone. No one actually has a bad relationship. That's a bad map of the territory. In real life, the territory called real life and living, you cannot have a relationship. Excuse me, because it's not a thing, right? You didn't buy it at the shop. You can't put it on the shelf. You can't stick it in your pocket. It's not a thing. It's not an object. However, as a noun, we can grammatically say, I have. It's a thing I can possess. I have a bad relationship. Now, if you were to say out loud, and anyone viewing this video, if you were to say out loud to yourself while you're watching this, hopefully no one's around, but just say it out loud, I have a bad relationship with someone. If that were true, how would you be feeling? What would be your body response? Well, people usually comment and they say, I feel stuck or frustrated or angry or whatever it might be. Well, in real life, Nobody has one. It's a process. And we have words for processes. They're verbs. Verbs are doing words. A lot of verbs have a suffix, ing at the end. So a better map, a more accurate map of the territory called life and living, or in this case, relating, would be the word not relationship, but relating. So you'd have to change your mapping. You'd have to change your languaging. You'd have to change your narrative of it. So you can't, if you have to use the word relating instead of relationship, you'd have to change your language to say, I'm relating to someone badly.
Mhm.
Now, for our viewers, if you say that out loud, I'm relating to someone badly, what are you instantly thinking? I've got options. I could change it. Suddenly you're at cause. Suddenly you have the capacity. You have choices now instantly.
And
So
in a
what's the difference
coaching or counseling situation, what is it specifically you're doing or they doing in the relating? So how
in
are
the
you
relating?
relating? Why are you relating? What was said, what was done, what specifically, rather than these global generalizations. I have a bad
Right.
relationship, and there's no specificity. But the moment you come into specificity and you say, what is it about the way you were related to or relating to? It's more,
That's right.
yeah, got it.
Yes. Yeah. And instantly, if I have a map that says I have a bad relationship and I believe that map, I believe that language, that narrative, then I feel like I'm stuck. If I say the language instead, I'm relating to someone badly, new choices instantly appear that I could change it if I actually wanted to. The real question is, do I want to? It's the real question. But instantly, from no choice to choice was bang in a matter of seconds. It was like saying abracadabra, and everything starts to change. Now, one of the challenges we have two challenges with something like nominalization, which is just only one of the distinctions in wellness languaging. But with two challenges with the nominalizations. One is that most times we don't even recognize a nominalization when we say it. Right?
Mm.
There's so many things that are nominalizations: decisions, budget, right, family, almost any value that you have, happiness, honesty, integrity, peace. These actually are all processes that you actually have to do, right? And you can start doing them in the present right now, rather than waiting for one day this thing will appear in your life. One day happiness will come to me. No, it won't. You have to do happying right now, right?
Mm.
Which allows to the second issue, which is many words we have that are actually processes, we actually don't have a verb form, a proper verb form for, right? So happiness is a great example. We don't really have the word happying, but you can make it. Or you can kind of go, let me just put that kind of language to it. How would I do happying in this moment, right? Well, then new choices will start to emerge.
Mm.
Well, health is a nominalization. Wellness is a nominalization. Most diseases and ailments, the names for them are nominalizations. They're not things. They're processes. They're processes that your body is doing, that your mind body is doing. They're processes that are the result, or they could be also be outcomes that are the result of dietary habits, lack of exercise. It could be a whole stress. It could be a whole range of things. By stress is a normalization. Right? We don't have stress. We have to do stressing. We have to have stressing thoughts and stressing beliefs, and we have to do stressing tensions in our body. Um, and so once we start to de-nominalize, put them back into processes, we now start to have choices on a lot of this. And so the focus of wellness languaging, this is a long way to explain what's underneath the concept of wellness languaging. What's behind it is you being at choice of taking control, putting yourself back in the driver's seat of your own health and wellness through your own levels of consciousness by increasing your awareness of the way you are using narrative, things your internal dialogue that you're saying to yourself, as well as the dialogue, the narratives you're taking on from general society. There's lots of well-meaning relatives, right? Friends, family, right, that want to do things, but they'll come to you with a narrative that can lock you in into unwell psychology, right? If they come up to you and they say, "Oh, I know that you're going through some depression. How's your depression?" In order to process that sentence, right, my body has to re-engage in the feelings of depression and check into how I'm doing with it. right?
Neural ignition.
That's right. Yeah. So you have to recognize, bless their hearts, they don't know that they're doing the best that they know, but you have to be on guard in terms of, is this the best narrative supporting me? How would I rework the languaging to re-engage in my own wellness processing uh, ways of being, for lack of better terms? And one of the other aspects I'll point out very quickly is in wellness languaging, it's related to this notion of turning processes into nouns, but it's whenever you look at your health or wellness, whatever the conditions, issues, whatever you want to call it, as soon as you make it an it, as soon as you can point to it, right? I have a depression. There's a it. I can point to. It's not me. There's this thing called a depression, or there's this thing called IBS, or there's this thing called Crohn's disease that I can point to, as if it has nothing to do with you. Right? And if you actually turn it back into a process, you go, these are symptoms that is occurring because your body's trying to respond to a whole range of processes that you're engaging in, like could be stressful thoughts that causes your stomach to cramp up. It could be that poor dietary choices that's causing your body to not digest well. It could be lack of exercise that's causing your body to not digest well. It could be poor breathing habits that's not causing the peristaltic wave to actually move your intestines properly. There could be a range of things that, because you're lacking awareness of the processes, you think it's an it that has now affecting a you. Well, your ailments are not actually separate from you. They're a part of the way you are doing yourself, and you can do yourself differently. And I'm not saying wellness languaging is the answer. What I'm saying is it's a major part of coming back to a level of consciousness
Mm.
that promotes a wellness way of being,
Well,
a more well-being.
I found from my own perspective that when I changed my internal narrative, my whole health world changed. And when the narrative started coming through from the world narratives of COVID, I decided to create my own internal narrative to face into that. And therefore, I've remained healthy through that, and it hasn't upset my apple cart. But when I can
Yeah.
see how it shut people down so critically, and all of a sudden they've contracted sniffles, colds, illnesses,
Yes.
anxiety. The list is endless, all from the narrative, which has come from externally, but it's identified with their internal natural tendencies of language because they don't have a wider range of vocabulary or an understanding of the nominalizations. They've just jumped straight into those patterns, and all of a sudden you see it manifesting in their bodies and in their lives immediately. So, yeah, that's why I was so passionate to get you on board, to wake people up, to say, how you think through these current circumstances is going to have a huge effect on your health and well-being.
Oh yeah, it has, and it's quite instant too, as you pointed out. Once people take on the narratives that are fear-based narratives that are being driven through media, etc., that as soon as that happens, as you say, sniffles, they get little colds, things of that nature, and you're seeing the placebo nocebo effect occurring
Mm.
right there. But the other aspect, which is, it's, to me, it's remarkable that these things are so well known, and yet the mainstream narratives, through media, through society, etc., just completely wash it away, despite how well known it is. We do know that the number one thing, right? So in order to stay well in this COVID environment, one of the things we do need is a good functioning immune system, right? This is most an ideal defense, right? So no one would disagree with that. We need an ideal immune system. We also know that the number one thing that will impair the immune system, other than saying, you were next to, a nuclear reactor or something of that nature, but the number one thing that will impair the immune system and impair it instantly will be stress. Right? We know that. We know that as soon as we go into the stress response, instantly the immune system gets suboptimized. Instantly, it can't do the repair, recovery, etc., because it's busy now defending. It's busy, trying to armor up. Right? Now, Stress will instantly impair. Guess what will produce stress right away? Fear, right? Fear, signs of threat, right? So terrific. So once we start taking on the narratives of how dangerous how COVID is and how you could die at any minute and all these types of things, instantly we're going to impair the immune system right off the bat. Now, I'm not saying be Pollyanna. I'm not saying completely discount it away. What I am saying, though, is you need to be on guard and to make sure that, okay, whether it's COVID or whether it's anything else, it could be meningococcal, it could be whatever, right? The point is that, yes, be prepared, be smart, but don't be in a fearful, distressed state. Don't be careful of the narratives that keep trying to distress you about the current condition, because as soon as that happens, you're going to be in a much worse, less than well state to actually deal with not just COVID or not just any other major disease, even just common cold, right? The more likelihood that you're just not going to feel well one day because your immune system has been impaired through constant stress. So again, it really, at the end of the day, all of this is a call. What wellness languaging really is about, as I said, it's not the silver bullet. It's not saying this handles everything. I'm just saying it's one part of the larger puzzle. But what wellness languaging is asking people to do is be conscious, be aware, be conscious of how you are creating your world through your narratives and its impact on your mind, body, and overall well-being, because it has a direct impact.
I think the contamination is not just biological, it's psychological and sociological. There's such a thing now where people are aware that in a relationship, they'll say it's a toxic relationship. Now, when people have got debilitating patterns, you really have to have a strategy to deal with that, to not be impacted in your workplace, in your family environments, and your relationships. So, for me, I feel saying, "Oh, I want to be conscious," and they've got all this idea of meditating and baying at the moon and the fairies and all the rest of it. But no, it's becoming really aware of what affects you. Like, yes, we know diet is important. It affects our metabolism, our makeup, but the state you're in, the conscious state of well-being, of peace and tranquility and equipoise as you move through your life, is so powerfully impacting to your health and how all the nutrients dock with you. You can have the healthiest food in the world, but if you're in a toxic relationship, that isn't going to go through your system real well. So I really concur with all the things you're saying, and it's beautiful. And I think leads on through the wellness languaging, how it impacts second order change when we can look at the narratives and really start to say, well, there must be an antithesis to some of the narratives that are coming out through COVID, because it's not about Pollyanna, it's about consciousness and awareness, and say, what is the risk? How to mitigate the risk? But how do we proceed with optimism and still build and move forward? Because during this period, a lot of people shut down. They say, well, when COVID's over, maybe we've got to live with COVID forever, because if it's not COVID, it'll be something else. Does that perplex me? No, humanity's been faced with these challenges since it existed. So it's about being resourceful, optimistic, facing into these things with a toolkit, with a strategy. And what this leads me to ask you a little bit more about second order change, which we're both passionate about. And it stems all the way back to when I first met you 20 years ago, all that time at Buffalo, when you said you wanted to start a movement. And I realized at that time you're saying something to the effect of the same thing.
Yes.
We might have got more complex, more educated, but right from the beginning, my initial relationship with you is learning this man is talking about the things that are going on underneath that the average person in the street just walks past. They don't see it. And it comes down to internal dialogue, narrative, what you are aspiring to in your life. And it's not to get another position of elevation in life for status or ego. It's how do I live through these challenges. And without second order change, without consciousness and awareness, we're stuck. So tell us a little bit about the second order change.
Yeah, so, thanks for the brilliant lead in because they're so intimately connected. Look, several different angles in which I could approach this. So
Mm-hmm.
first, coming back to our original premises, second order change is a transformational change. The culture, the paradigm, the mindset, the worldview changes. The whole system actually transforms and changes. In contrast to first order change, so first order change is any change inside of a system or culture or paradigm or a mindset, uh, where changes can occur, but the system itself doesn't change. And this explains a lot of that old French saying of the more things change, the more they stay the same. And I think we've probably seen it. If anyone's worked in a large organization, you will have seen change programs come every 6 months, a new change program, and at the end of the day, it's still the same. Status quo prevails, because they've been first order. Nothing is changing about the way the system is self-organizing, and there'll be some key loops that will be there. And one of the key loops, as you point out, with humans will be things like internal dialogue, or the consciousness that's actually driving that particular internal dialogue. Now, when we are in a stressed state, and we've taken on a fearful state, or we are less than creative, for instance, when we're in a stressed state, all our neuropsychology starts gearing up for protection. It starts gearing up for defense.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in order to do, but you've got to understand what happens when that happens, right? What happens is, as long as we are defending, well, first, what are we defending? We're defending the status quo. We're defending the current system. So, what are we not doing? Creating and evolving. We're not moving to the next order of consciousness that we could be going. So anytime we go into stress, you're not often going to be finding yourself being very creative, right? Not producing anything new, not in that particular way. You're going to be problem solving. You're going to be doing a whole range of things to try and get rid of whatever is the threat or whatever is the stress, so you can get back to status quo. And so many people approach health and wellness exactly this way. They'll go to a doctor and they'll say, something's wrong. Can you fix it? Or can you get rid of, I've got this pain. Can you get rid of it? And the implicit outcome there is, can I get back to the way I was? The thing is, the way that you were is probably what created the problem. The dietary patterns, the thought patterns, your weight, your style of living, all those things created the health, the situation, all the conditions to produce those kinds of health systems. And so I'm not saying don't do that. I'm saying, yeah, there's times when, yeah, you definitely need treatment, so to speak. Right? You need to do that. But that's not the goal. Right? The goal isn't get back to the start line. The goal is to emerge into greater ways of being, higher orders of consciousness, more fulfilled ways of living, greater expression of self, whatever it might be, and whatever it might be for you. How do you do that? Well, you can't do it when you're dealing with health issues, wellness issues, when you're depressed every day. It's not that they're bad things. They're things you need to attend to, because they're part of your learning process. When you realize they're not things, right? If you can step back and get this meta consciousness, metacognition about what is it. Again, I teach people a lot of this around how to pay attention to what is it that these symptoms that your body's producing, or your mental emotional states are producing. What is it it's trying to do for you in the process of healing? Now, this comes back to the notion of some core principles around the wellness languaging idea, which is, not only is that health and wellness are functions of integration and functions of consciousness, but that life itself, generally left to its own devices, will try and move towards degrees of health, healing, and integration. And the most obvious example of this is, well, if you got a cut on your finger, what happens? Well, it heals, ideally, unless there's a reason why it won't. But as a general rule, the cut will heal, right? Well, why is that? What is it within nature that's trying to actually just always come back to some healing mode? And as you know, Fred, that the etymology, the root word of healing, is, it means to make whole,
Mm-hmm.
right? To bring everything together again. And so the healing process is an integration process, which is why when you have language that takes an ailment or a condition and makes it an it, you've gone in the opposite direction. You've disintegrated. You've fragmented the condition away from your way of your processes, that your natural organic processes that's actually occurring. So every time you start pointing to the back, the neck, the headache, the heartburn, where did you go in all of this? Right? As opposed to, gee, I wonder why my body's responding this way. I wonder what kind of choices I've been making. I wonder what my thoughts are. I wonder, if I need to change a few things to change how my body's now responding, because it comes back to you. Bring those choices back to your responsibility to make whole. And it requires you to now keep being creative. You have to keep being, our language is meta, to yourself. You have to be aware of yourself. And this is where the real second order change is going to start to occur, that it's only when you're in varying, you're at least in certain a level or degree of wellness and health, is energy, mental, emotional, physical energy freed up, where it doesn't have to try and heal you, so to speak. It hasn't to try and fix what seems to be the problem. Instead, it's now freed up to become creative, to start expressing who
Wow.
you are and who you want to be in the world, right? It's really hard to think, wow, I can think of all the great possibilities in my life when you're coughing and throwing up and having diarrhea. It's like, that's tough to do, right? Whereas when you're feeling well and the sun is out and you're thinking, well, now's a good time where you got lots of psychic energy and physical energy to kind of go, gee, I wonder what I would like to create in my world. And this is the
Wow.
imperative. Your in our language, your essence, your way of being needs to express itself through the body. So you need to make sure your body can allow that, right? In many ways. Now,
That's
how do you do that?
fantastic, Marvin,
Yeah.
because I guess I've taken on the aspect that when I'm feeling well, that's the normal, not when
Yes.
I'm feeling not well. Now, I used to be the other way around. Now, when something encroaches upon me, I say to myself, what decisions have I made in the last 24 hours, 2 or 3 days, week, that has brought about this condition? And I retrace my steps and I go,
That's right.
there it is.
Aha, that's right.
And then I go, now let's implement this. And what I can see for my wellness, once upon a time it was eat this food, do these exercise, go to this personal trainer and you'll be right. No, you're in a constant monitoring state now of your environment, of your internal environment, your emotional, psychological environment, and you've got to make these adjustments on the fly all the time. And what exercise fit you yesterday may not fit you today or tomorrow. What foods you were eating this morning just maybe have to be put on hold. Like when Bill was talking about how he had to take coffee out of his diet for some time, and then he was able to, when he got past a point, reintroduce it. But he's monitoring it. Just a lot of people our age are monitoring alcohol now, saying, okay, we know how to socially responsibly do that, but we know the price we're going to pay, and we can pinpoint to what substance, what drink, what time of the day we had it. So yeah, that's profound to me. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and you're also highlighting, you've touched on something so critically important here, which is where another aspect of where the second order change starts to occur in the wellness concept and the wellness languaging concept, which is, for some people that are not going second order, they're staying mostly first order. They see a lot of the things that you recommended, you're monitoring this and you're paying attention to this and et cetera, and you're recognizing what you can and you should and shouldn't do at particular times, or you'll know the effects. For a lot of people, when it's first order, for them, that's doing. That's a doing mode. And as a doing mode, it's a task and it's a burden, and they'd rather not if they didn't have to, right? And they're only doing it because they have to, right? Because otherwise they pay the price. Whereas the second order move is that you start to recognize, as you pointed out, feeling great is now the normal. This is not a doing mode. Monitoring is not a doing. It's an expression of being. That why would I punish myself, right? Why would I settle for feeling bad? That's not who I am, right? Feeling normal is who I am. Feeling well as a normal state is who I am. So of course I'm going to monitor things, right? And if I'm not feeling well, I'm going to backtrack it because this is not me, right? And that's where the second order change really starts to occur when people's health and wellness don't it moves from being a task or on their to-do list of something they have to focus on, or it has a goal they have to set, and instead it just becomes, oh no, this is a creative, natural expression of who I am, a fully well expressive human being, someone who is alive and knows they're alive, knows that they are living, and wants to live, wants to feel this experience of being alive. Uh, that's natural. That's
A
that's who I
conscious
am.
expression of their being.
That's right.
A natural
And,
outflow. For instance, I know that I had the reference structure before of not being well and getting sippets of wellness. Now I
right.
have a long period of
Yes.
being well and I get the sippets of not being well. I can directly relate it to some omission or commission on my behalf
Yeah.
of some discipline that I agreed with myself that would be enjoyable. And the interesting thing is, it's no longer discipline.
Yes. Exactly.
Some way of life. And I never thought that was possible. I
Yeah.
never thought that I would just enjoy the things and the activities because of the narrative, because of the languaging.
That's
If
right.
I'm going to be a world class athlete at 68, what are the behaviors? What are the foods? What are the actions? And then you find, oh my God, this is my way of beingness. This is
Yes.
the languaging. And then when you say something out of context, you immediately get a hit in your body. And because you become body aware, you go,
Yes.
you did this to you, Freddie. You said that. You thought that. Oh my gosh. And that's the correction. So
Uh,
from this particular functionality, what we've talking about, we've gone through, the second order change, and it's come from the wellness languaging, is the generative learning that comes, and that's the exciting part for me. The generative learning. Can you, expand and elucidate on that?
Yeah, these are all, so each of these lenses, from the second order change to the neurobehavioral modeling to the generative learning, these are all entirely huge methodologies unto themselves. So the generative learning element, again, is my application of my application of neurobehavioral modeling applied to how people are able to elevate or increase their levels of consciousness over time. Now, for most people have done that to varying degrees. Then there are some people that do this on an ongoing basis. And so as I start to model, ranging from people that I've met all the way to looking at a multitude of wisdom traditions and their explanations of how one goes about this, we find the common patterns that are there. We also find what's idiosyncratic to certain kinds of modalities that we can move to the side and just say, okay, that's just a little bit of their particular bent on things, whereas there are some common, very, very common patterns. And one has to do with these levels. It begins with the level of metacognition. It begins with this level of self-awareness, which is trainable, it's learnable. And so, as you pointed out, people becoming aware of their internal dialogue, but it's also becoming aware of things, of the pictures they're making in their heads, becoming aware of their own body sensations, for instance, becoming aware of the tonality that they use when they talk to themselves, because we represent the world to ourselves in these modalities. And the first step is becoming aware that whenever you're reacting or responding to things, very rarely are you actually responding to the actual external world.
Mm.
More often than not, what you're responding to is your own reaction to it, your own response. Or another way to put it sounds like a tautology. A better way to put it is, someone says something, you'll probably, they'll say, oh, we have this issue again. Okay, well, that's what they said. Odds are pretty likely for some people, for instance, as soon as they hear that, they'll instantly make a picture in their head of the previous problem. Then they hear themselves telling someone about how they should have fixed it. And then they have their own internal voice now saying, oh, no, here we go again. Even I'm so upset. And they're no longer responding to what the person said. They're responding to their pictures, their own sounds, their own replay of what happened. They're responding to their own internal world. And it happens in fractions of a second. Right? And then they get all upset. Now they think they're responding to the external world, but it's because they're not aware of all these things going on internally to them. And so the first step is
Yeah.
metacognition. Now the next step will be, in terms of real generative learning, for things to go really generative, is you need to have meta awareness. So what this now means is so I often ask this of a group, when you have that internal voice in your head, and people start to go, and they're thinking to themselves, what internal voice? And you go, yeah, that internal voice, right? The one that's asking that question. But if you can imagine that the pictures you're making in your head, or the things you're saying to yourself, or even noticing your own body sensations at any point in time, it's one thing to become aware of those things, of those pictures, of those sounds, of those body sensations. Now become aware that there is a you that's aware of this.
Mm.
And that's a very different order of awareness. It requires a different order of consciousness for that to even occur to you, where you can start to go, wow, it's starting to come into my awareness that I'm actually aware of these things. Now, if you go a little bit further again, at some point, as many wisdom traditions will say, you'll start to recognize that you actually are the awareness itself. Now, what is this awareness itself? Now, one of the other things I've discovered, separate from what many wisdom traditions are saying, but there's some other wisdom traditions will also start to point out, yes, there's this awareness, but there's also this other, there different traditions use different words, but I'll use the word essence. There's an essence, there's an essence of being that's trying to express itself through this awareness. It wants to know itself. And if you start to look at it in terms of, again, as a modeler, as we start to look at so many of, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, what's it all about? What is the story of all stories that everybody's life is following, that is playing out on? And we start to find it's this awareness itself. It's awareness of who I am to even begin with, right? The magic question of who am I? The unanswerable question. And so as people start to explore this, we start to find, in order to answer this question from a generative consciousness, generative learning viewpoint, as you start to inquire more and more into your own experiences, your own issues, your own health conditions, whatever it might be, you'll start to become aware that there's a you that's aware of this. If there's a concern, what is the concern about? If there's a joy, what is the joy about? And really what you're discovering is not an it. It's like, oh, that's it. No, it's not it. It's you. It's you trying to express yourself. And so when you start to go into a generative learning mode, where you actually start to now, the reason why it's called generative is because it's generating new insights, new levels of awareness that wasn't there before the inquiry. As you start to explore this, you start to recognize, wow, there's a me that's just trying to explore myself. So just completed a recent program with a group of people around generative inner work. And we start to find, for instance, that, let's say someone's got an issue. Let's say someone's got, oh, I've got this, uh, um, we'll come back to the thing we talked about before. Okay, I'm feeling depressed. All right, so let's explore that. Are you aware that you're depressed? Yeah, I am. So, okay, are you aware that you're the one who's aware? So, depression aside, this is part of the wellness languaging, the dissociative aspect. Move the depression aside. Just go into the fact that you're aware and just continue to be aware. Now, what is the depression actually about? Well, my life is miserable. Okay, just let that be. That's just narrative. Let that go. Be aware that that's a concern for you, that your life is miserable. Explore. So what is life should be? So if you that's clearly something you don't want, what's it supposed to be instead? You become aware, and you don't answer in your head. Go into your essence, and you start going, well, I should be happy. Ah, so if you are happy, what would that do for you? What gets fulfilled for you when you're happy? The person goes, no, I'm now at peace. So if you're at peace, what gets fulfilled for you? Then I'm free to be. That is what the essence is after. It's not about the depression. It's not about it's just about feeling free to be. Now, what does it take to actually feel free to be? Like, separate everything else. Just be aware of self, right? That's an aspect. That's one of the aspects and related to this condition that is trying to express itself in your being when you go into this generative state of consciousness. And there's a whole set of processes to do this. And so when you are free to be, what does that feel like? And people use words like, I feel like I'm at home, I've come home. Yeah, that's right. You've come back to the place where you should be, right? Where it's safe, where it's nurturing, where all these things are there. It's great. And this is an essence of who you are. Now, let me ask you a couple of questions. How long does it take you to be who you are? Right away, right? How much effort do you need to do you have to put out to be who you are? None at all. Okay. So do you not just be who you are then? Great. Now, is that profound? For a lot of people, this would be a profound moment. I'm just giving an example. It could be a range of different other experiences for people. But someone might go, yes, it's profound. You go, great. Now I want you to look back and look at the depression. That was you trying to signal to yourself that you've lost your freedom of being, come back to who you are. Right? And the depression now is no longer a thing to be fixed or gotten rid of. You start to realize, what a gift. That actually was my own innate wisdom talking to me, telling me how much I've lost myself, and the path back was through a generative consciousness, a generative awareness. That's the generative learning elements that will start coming into play. And as I start to play with this more and more, now keep in mind, it didn't start this way, right? In the late 80s, when I started this research on generative learning, I was actually looking at it from an educational standpoint. Right? I was looking at adult learning. And it's come to be that over the years, as I start to explore it more and more, it became more about consciousness. Then it became more about there's this expression of essence of being. And again, people use different language for these types of things, but I'll still see the same phenomenon that starts to occur. And when people reach this level, where they start to become more aware of, for lack of better terms, I'll use the word authentic, but authentic is a nominalization, so a self-authoring way of being, where you're self-creating who you are, because I'm not defending, right? My energy's freed up where I can create and I can become aware of how I want to self-author my way of my expression into the world. I start to find that, you know what starts to show up right away beyond internal peace, etc. It's exactly what Joseph Campbell was saying with the hero's journey. It's exactly what wisdom traditions have been saying for 3,500 years, is that another aspect that will now start to emerge when people are fully connected to self is they'll want to come back and interact with the world and contribute, add value. They want to serve. They want to help people. They want to make the world a better place. And it's not because it's just this high fluting idea. It's a natural expression of their connectedness back into the world. And as I start to do behavioral modeling on people that have this sense of purpose, people say, I need to find my purpose. Well, purpose is a nominalization. You don't find it. It's not a thing. Right? You have to do purposing, and that's a process you have to generate within yourself. And I start to find that and it's difficult to do. It's difficult to do authentically, meaning in a self-authored way, as opposed to, I want to go out and feed the poor. Look, that may or may not be self-authored. I don't know. All right. But I start to find that when people go to this generative learning state, their natural expression of wanting to come back into the world will be some form of part of their sense of purpose as to why they're here. Has this connection, and they want to serve. And guess what will start to emerge? Some intention to produce or facilitate or lead second order transformational change. They
Wow.
don't want to do things that make no difference whatsoever. They
Only
want to do things
20
that
years.
make a difference.
Only
Yeah.
took you 20 years with me. But yeah, that's my way of coming back in the world. You've articulated a journey, really, for me to go from an unconscious state through the transitions and those many years where I've come back into the world, and I'm purposing. I'm purposing.
Yes.
And that's part of this channel and what we're doing. Marvin, this stuff's amazing. I would love to get you back again and further the conversation so that we can just give people so much more. You're such an incredible wealth of information. How do people get in touch with you? What's the best way?
Yeah, thanks, Freddie. The best way is get to my website, www.behavioralmodeling.com. Now, behavioral modeling is spelled British spelling and not American spelling. So behavioral is Behavioral, and modeling is spelled with two L's, Modelling, all one word, behavioralmodeling.com. You'll see a way to actually get onto our contact list where we let people know about our upcoming programs and things, and our newsletters, etc. So just subscribe; it's free, and you'll be in the loop. You'll be in the information loop with us.
Well, we will be including all your social links, which I'll get off you, so that people can find that in the notes below. Thank you so much for your precious time, Marvin. You're a wealth of information and inspiration to me and so many others. So we'll look forward to getting this out there and hearing from you again.
Great. Thanks, Freddie. Thanks for inviting me on. It's great to be here.
Absolute pleasure.